So I'm going to be talking about a little bit different use case than we've been talking about over the last couple of days, about using annotation as a tool for enabling accessibility, particularly accessibility of visual content. And to kick off this discussion, I wanted to show you a video of how some of the students that we serve through our Bookshare online library read over 200,000 books. And there's a couple of ways. We're going to start with a student that uses what's called a refreshable Braille display.
I'm Middleton, and I'm here as a student at the Alabama School for the Blind. When I use Bookshare, there are more options, because there are several categories to choose from, such as teen, sports, science fiction, fantasy. It's very convenient because Braille books are actually pretty large, and on the Braille note, it's all just there. You don't have to lug around so much. Since I've had access to Bookshare, I've noticed that I've actually improved because not only am I listening to the book, but I'm actually reading it here on my Braille display.
Okay, so you get the hang of that. And then the other way that students also read books on Bookshare is through text-to-speech. And I'm specifically talking about our blind and vision impaired members. Many of the Bookshare members are also dyslexic, but the issues that I'll be talking about are less pronounced with them. And so here I am in Safari, and I'm using what's called the Bookshare web reader, which is based on Redium Web, an early version of Redium Web. And I'm going to turn on VoiceOver, which is the screen reading technology that's built into OS X.
Bookshare web reader, window, link, figure 1.3, has keyboard focus.
All right, so actually this part will be tricky because, let's see here. Can you hold this for a second for me? Because operating the keyboard is... Okay, so with VoiceOver, what it allows me to do is to navigate the textual content pretty easily.
Unsurprisingly, the death toll that results from the avalanche of new cases.
Now, where the issues come is
figure 1.3.
Figure 1.3 completely got skipped over. And so I missed out on a pretty major piece of information that's contained in this digital book, because that image was actually lacks an image description, and more importantly, lacks a description that, for example, could have a structured table underneath it that would describe the data that's contained in that image. And so this is where we think that annotation could play a big role around visual content, which many times tends to lack proper descriptions. The other area that we think could be addressed is mathematics. Many times, due to the poor lack of MathML support in modern browsers, and particularly in reading systems, it turns out that publishers tend to embed math as JPEG images or PNG images, which are then not accessible to a screen reader such as VoiceOver. And so that's another area where, and this is why I was asking about annotation using math, where someone could go and annotate an image with MathML to essentially transcribe the content that's contained in that image. And in video description, it has even worse support. Where we are today is that disability student services, teachers, parents, friends end up essentially annotating or describing these images and mathematics for students. And the tools that they use today are pretty disparate. So things have not been aggregated into a common framework. And what I'm going to do is show you some examples of these tools that can serve as a basis for use cases for annotation. So the first tool I'm going to show you is a tool that we call Poet. And what Poet allows Bookshare volunteers to do is to upload a book in DAISY format, which is a common ebook format specifically focused on accessibility, it's being replaced by EPUB 3, and this tool will soon support EPUB 3. And when you upload the book, you then can see all the images that are in that book on this left-hand pane. And then if I click on any of these images, so let's go to this chart right here, that image is then shown on the right-hand side, and then I can go and actually put in a description to that image, in this case, a graph. If the image was, and we actually provide guidelines to the volunteers and sometimes staff on how to describe those images. In the case of mathematics, we also provide what we call an equation editor, so someone can use a format called ASCII math, which is a little bit easier to understand than LaTeX to a volunteer, and they can put in the ASCII math, which is what you see here, and then that actually gets converted into using MathJax into MathML, and then it's visually represented here, and then they can insert that. So we have a way of taking a graphical image and transcribing it into MathML, which would then be accessible with certain technologies that are out there today. So, and this is a visual editor that we've also been working on with a partner for transcribing math. So let me show you another example of another tool. This is a tool called UDescribe, which was created by a group here in San Francisco called the Smith Kettlewell Eye Institute. And what UDescribe is, it's similar to Poet, but it's focused on videos, for doing video description. And they've actually made it so it's really easy for anyone to jump onto the platform and transcribe and describe video, particularly since it's focused on YouTube video as opposed to copyrighted materials or not so freely available materials. So what I thought is I'd show a quick demo of what video description does, and I'm going to pick a very popular video type on the internet, cat videos.
Oscar and his best friend Klaus take their daily walk.
So the person's describing the text that's on the video here.
Or we get to see two cats screaming at the door.
And then what happens is then the video player goes back to the regular audio that was embedded in the video.
Oscar and Klaus wait by the doorway. Oscar is a smaller gray and brown kitten with no eyes.
Okay, you get the idea. So the point here is that there are two tracks. There's the track that was originally embedded with the YouTube video, and then there is a track that's been created by a volunteer or someone, a professional video describer, who took the video, would pause it, and then record with their voice what's actually being seen in the video, and then they can upload those tracks that they've added, those description tracks, up to the UDescribe servers. So that's an example there. If you think about it, you could generalize this as video annotation. And then the final example that I want to show you of another tool, this is a tool that I learned about a few years ago. It actually went defunct for a couple years due to lack of funding, and then it's been, someone funded it, and it's been revived. And what it is, it's a Firefox extension that's used. It's actually quite popular among the blind and vision impaired community. And one of the features that it has is that someone who's blind can ask someone who's sighted to essentially describe an image for them with this tool. And so if you right-click on any image, you have the ability to label that image or add an annotation or add a description, whatever you want to call it. And then once you do that, let me go show you an example. It will actually replace the image with a description of the image, and that it gets this bright yellow highlight, and it's also screen reader accessible. So 3 different examples of how this description of visual elements is done, or you could think about as annotation. So if we think about this use case, what requirements are there from a technical standpoint? First is that these tools would not be useful unless the user experiences are accessible. So I need to be able to create, read, add to an annotation with my screen reader. So that's the first thing there. And this is all doable. We actually created a bit of a prototype around this using Hypothesis last year, but more work needs to be done, and actually a perfect project for the Hack Day. Secondly, we need to have the ability to do granular image annotation so that you could describe different parts of an image. It was great to see HTML markup being used for annotation, and I think we need to include MathML markup, and I think MathJax is a good way to go from what I heard this morning. One requirement that hasn't really been discussed much over this last couple of days is a mechanism so someone could request an annotation. So I've run into some visual content that is not described. I can actually create an annotation which is a request for someone to go and describe what that visual element is. And then we need to have metadata that just says this annotation is really a description of this image. And then finally, it would be great to then enable publishers to be able to query all those annotations that have been created by people as descriptions, and then just fold that back, decide which of those to fold back into the original content for the next revision of the textbook or book. So I hope I gave you kind of some good examples of how annotation can be a powerful tool for addressing kind of some of the final frontiers of accessibility. It's happening today. There are proof points why this is needed. And we need really unified and standard mechanisms so that the work of these few good Samaritans who are going through and describing images and transcribing mathematics for the blind and vision impaired community, so that their work can be magnified further. And we hope that at the Hack Day tomorrow, some people work on some of these projects. There you have my contact information, and I'll turn it to questions now. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Greg Kellogg. I wanted to comment on your thought there about a request for annotation. I fully agree with that. In my talk at the workshop the other day, I suggested that thinking of annotations as being one type of thing might be too narrow, and that in general, the types of things we're doing as performing operations, and it might be a common operation, might be some other operation which is a call for response there as well. So, yeah, I really like that idea.
That's great. Well, great. I'll be around. Thank you so much.